Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson. I'm Renee Swanson, your host of the Covert Narcissism podcast. And I thank everyone for joining me today. I'm really super excited for the guest that we have today. I know you're going to love to hear what she has to say and to share with this audience. So today we have Rebecca Zung. Rebecca is a narcissist negotiating expert. A top attorney, a best-selling author with USA Today, and I'm excited to hear about her book. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This topic is so needed, and I love what you're doing too. I mean, so needed.
It is needed. And in a world where there's so many people hurting and not enough awareness and knowledge out there, and so they're struggling to find the support that they need.
Totally. Especially with covert narcissists. I always call covert narcissists the pearl grabbers. What? Me? I would never do that.
Right. I mean, you've got it down well.
I would never say that. I didn't mean that.
Right. So you are in this world of negotiating with narcissists, which I'm really interested in hearing how that goes.
Yeah.
So maybe get us started by telling us a little bit about maybe your view on narcissism and kind of where it comes from.
Oh, I mean, I sort of say really probably started long into, as a child, my mom was an alcoholic. And so, I mean, I was kind of conditioned early on to be the good one, where my feelings were not really validated, and so I had to be the good one and I had to be hyper responsible. And even, my father was a great dad, but he, Asian, so I'm half Chinese and half German. So that I always say I have no fun genes whatsoever. But it's like, but even with my dad, who was a doctor, he was like working a lot and there's very high expectations. And so, how I was validated was I, did I get good grades, whatever. And so with my mom, it was always sort of like walking on eggshells, and it was, very moody, and I was the oldest at home. And so it was just hyper responsible and taking care of things. And how I was sort of validated was the one who, I didn't get to have, feelings as far as like that goes. You know what I mean? It was sort of like, just do your thing, be a good girl. And that's what you're supposed to do. And then at school, I was bullied for being Asian, and I never said anything about it. It was, in those days when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I mean, there weren't parents like marching into the school or whatever. I mean, you just
Right.
put your head down and dealt with it. And so again, it was just, go along to get along, keep the peace. And so as I
Like my
grew
marriage.
up, yeah, exactly. Well, it's like it ended up being my whole life, basically.
Right.
Right. And so I became an advocate as a lawyer. And I think, and obviously I had a lot of success as a lawyer, but it's one thing to be an advocate on behalf of, and it's a whole different thing in your personal life.
Right.
Right. I mean, in your personal life, I became much more of a pleaser, much more of a, I'll fix things, I'll take care of. I'm the caregiver. I'm the one who handles. I'm the one because that was my role in life. My needs don't matter.
That's
Right.
the perfect environment for narcissism to show up.
Right. Exactly. And so that's the type of people that I would always attract in my life.
So
Of
having
course.
it in your personal life, when you became aware of that, I were you already on your path as an attorney? Did that just really enhance your knowledge in regards to helping others?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I would say that the term narcissism wasn't really used at all. It wasn't something that surfaced until a few years ago.
Right.
I mean, I would say, I became a lawyer in the year 2000. For many years, I mean, I practiced high net worth divorce law for a long time, high net worth divorce litigation, and it's the only kind of law I ever practiced. And so I will say, for the longest time, we sort of joked among the lawyers that all the wives would say their husbands were controlling and all the husbands would say their wives were crazy. And it was kind of like that. And it really wasn't until the last few years that the term narcissist was starting to creep into the vernacular. And then it was sort of like, well, everybody became a narcissist at that point.
Right.
And nobody really knew the exact definition of that term. And I will say that even for me, to me, a narcissist was a male blowhard, bragging, kind of misogynist person, a guy who would demand the best tables in a restaurant, who was, oh, I don't know, sort of, certainly not a female, and certainly not covert. I mean, I don't know.
A gentle personality.
No, I mean, or even a male who everybody thought was great on the outside.
Right.
I mean, I just never really thought about that there were different types of narcissists in the world. It didn't even occur to me,
Mhm.
honestly.
I think you and a lot of the world. There's a lot of the
Yeah.
world that's that way too, and I was the same way when I first came in and started kind of exploring what narcissism was. Because my counselor actually suggested, "Hey, you need to read about narcissism," and I went, "Yeah, but this doesn't fit," because I was picturing that life of the party, loud, boisterous, openly arrogant person, and that was not my husband. That was not what I was living. He was the quiet, shy, sit in the corner, and everybody, talked about how generous he was, and so it just didn't line up until I really discovered covert narcissism, the language around covert narcissism. That's what matched.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, everybody else thinks that these people are wonderful because they don't show that side of themselves to anybody else.
Right. Right. And they save that only for, behind closed doors when they've got you hooked and know how committed you are to the relationship. Well, then they can drop their guard.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
So,
So how do you negotiate with that? Like, is it possible to negotiate with a narcissist or a covert narcissist or any of these?
it is, but you have to understand how a narcissist is formed, and then I think the easiest way is to start understanding how a narcissist is formed so that you can start depersonalizing this person, because you, as the empathetic person, a person who actually does have feelings, and a person who, especially if, well, I mean, I think of it as, in a personal situation, but, even if it's your boss, or if it's a friend, or if it's maybe a
Sibling.
family member or whatever, understanding that if you actually have feelings in this situation, that the person that you're dealing with, as much as they may want to have feelings for you, and I think a lot of times they do want to,
Want to. Yes. Yes.
they they just really can't,
Mhm.
not the way you want them to.
Mhm.
And it's really because their brain has just been damaged in childhood. And the way I have and I've done a fair amount of research on this for my book, Slay the Bully, how to negotiate with a narcissist and win. And this is very eye-opening for me. Very eye-opening for me is what happens during childhood is, and this happens with all of us when we're in stress, but during childhood is when this damage takes place. When we're in stress, our bodies go into fight or flight. And when that happens, our bodies emit chemicals, hormones, which is adrenaline and cortisol principally. And that cortisol is what can be damaging, as we all know. As we all know as adults too, that cortisol, when it builds up in our body, can be damaging, right? Well, when it is bathing the limbic system part of the brain as children, it actually causes arrested development in that limbic system part of the brain. And so that's what actually causes what they call narcissistic injury. That's the cause of narcissistic injury. And so what happens is when they become triggered as adults by whatever, which it could be verbal or nonverbal. So it could be an eye roll, any kind of potential slight, any kind of thing that they think they're going to be, they're exposed, or their survival is going to be threatened in some way. They perceived survival,
Perceived threat.
perceived threat, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not rational. It's not reasonable, but they perceive it to be. Then that narcissistic injury is triggered, that limbic system takes back over. And what happens is then the cortex part of the brain, which is the thinking judgment part of the brain, the frontal part of the brain, then literally shuts down. And I've talked to brain experts about this. It literally shuts it down. And that limbic system part of the brain is the only thing that's in full gear. And then what happens is now you're just dealing with full irrational brain at this point. And when that happens, something happens called narcissistic blindness. Narcissistic blindness. And now they're unaware and you're dealing with collateral damage. And they are unaware of the collateral damage that they're causing to other people at that point. And by the way, if you look at the anatomy of the brain, it's actually really close to the memory part of the brain, right? If you look at there. And so when they say they don't necessarily remember, it could potentially be true if they're in this massive rage, by the way, and which some refer to that as narcissistic rage.
Right.
And so you literally cannot negotiate with or communicate with a narcissist in the same way that you can with a rational or reasonable person. You can't, because you're dealing with that. And by the way, they will self-sabotage to take you down. And I have seen this in my law practice, and it makes zero sense. Zero sense. So I've seen these people, I will burn my business to the ground before I pay that person alimony.
Right.
Okay. Why in the hell would you do that? But they're not thinking rationally, especially during the discard phase.
They're thinking with that triggered part of their brain that has
that limbic system.
Has set off all the alarm bells and all the, whir, whir. I picture the sirens going off in the back of their head.
Correct. You're not. And so when people say, hey, let's sit down, like normal, rational, reasonable people will sit down and say, hey, we don't want to pay attorney's fees. That would be stupid. Let's just come to a rational conclusion here. How can we both get to a little of something that we both want,
Mhm.
or let's have a communication. Let's rationally think this through, or let's put the kids first. How can we do that? They don't think that way. They just don't.
Wow. So what do you do with that? I mean, you
So,
gotta do
yeah,
something.
that's a good question. That's a good question. So, what you have to do, first of all, and here's the other piece of this that is so hard, is that the people who've been dealing with them are in this massive brain fog or cognitive dissonance because they've probably been dealing with these people for however long,
Mhm.
years sometimes. And so they're just like, oh my God, so discombobulated or
Right.
destabilized.
Right.
And a lot of times still under the spell of this person. And so, the first thing you have to do is what I call step one, don't run. Because I say step one, don't run. Step two, make a U turn. Step three, break free. And so step one is start to realize that that's what you're dealing with and put this invisible shield down around you and start to see them as that toddler having the tantrum on the floor.
Mhm.
And very first thing is demand respect for yourself. I don't care who it is, whether it's your mom, your husband, sister, brother, boss, whatever, whoever it is, you are entitled to respect.
Mhm.
So you can just start to say, oh, this approach isn't working for me. We can have this conversation later. Thanks for the feedback. Whatever. I can see that you're upset. We can talk later. Whatever it is that you need to say, just start to observe their behavior to them or whatever. Have a conversation later. But then strategy. So my SLAY method is number one, strategy. S is strategy. Have a vision. Where is it that you want to go? What is it that you want? Most people, the first thing I say is, they say is like, well, I want them to stop. I want them to leave me alone. I don't want. So your strategy is not like in terms of them.
Right.
It's in terms of you.
Right.
What do you want? Right. And be really, really specific. If it's a divorce, I want these as don't even just say half the assets or and don't be like crazy. I want it all. No, that's not happening. So what do you want and be specific? I want to buy the house out. Then you got to get it valued. Okay, I want these assets. All right, what do you got to do to get there? You're like specific,
Right. Right.
very specific. If it's a business partner, are you gonna buy the business out? Okay, what do you gotta do to get there? Do you need to file a lawsuit? All right, we gotta get it valued. What do you have to do? Like be specific. And then next thing is leverage. Leverage is always going to be in terms of what I call a two-tiered supply system. Diamond level supply versus coal level supply. Diamond level supply is their reputation. It's always going to be in terms of how they look to the world. That is something that they will protect and defend at any cost. And every narcissist has that. And every narcissist that means more to them than anything in the world, even more than their kids, even
Yes.
though that they say that they love their kids and all that, blah, blah, blah. No, it means more to them how they look
Right.
to
They
the
love
world.
how their kids make them look. That's
Correct.
what it ends up being that they're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's their number one, number one. Everything is always revolves around that. And what are their forms of diamond level supply? There's all that will inform everything else. Always. Because there could be more than one. It could be a new girlfriend. It could be the judge in the case. It could be their employees, employer. It could be neighbors, friends, their mom, their dad. Could be a number of things. Okay. But there's always going to be something with diamond level supply. Then there's coal level supply. The coal level supply is manipulating you, jerking you around. It's that sadistic thing that they get from making your life miserable. And
Mhm.
that's why you can't get out of these cases, because they enjoy the process of making you squirm. And most people think that they just want to win, and that's not the case. They enjoy the process of making your life miserable. And
Mhm.
I used to be a pawn in it, back when I was still practicing law. I mean, I used to have these guys that would be like, well, I'd rather pay you than her. And I'd be like, why? Like, I'm like sick of you too. Like,
So it takes a little while to kind of figure that what's going on there.
yeah, like I could like spend my day with other people other than you.
Right, right.
Like what the hell? But, so that's why they move goalposts all the time. That's why they say no to you saying yes to their own deal.
Mhm.
Like by the time you go back and say yes, that deal has already changed. That's why.
Their
So
goal is to
leverage.
make you miserable.
Right. So, what you have to do with leverage is you have to figure out a way to threaten a form of supply that's more important for them to protect or defend than the supply that they're getting from jerking you around. So, what does that look like? Well, you have to document and start to find patterns, or start to but figure out ways to potentially expose that diamond level supply.
Wow.
So to give you an example, I had a case where a guy was like, "I'm Mr. Mom. All I care about is my kid, blah, blah, blah." Okay, so this particular mom, during the case, in a 4-month period, they had 98 custody exchanges. He asked for change in the schedule 48 times. She agreed to it 46 times. Well, why do you need to change the schedule 48 times if
Right.
you're Mr. Dad? Well, they never think you're going to keep track. But there he did. He asked. And then, of course, she had all the supporting documentation, and then she had a chart. She charted it out. There was every single time. That's the kind of thing that threatens their diamond level supply. That's a perfect example of documentation. But, I have clients, I have a certification, high conflict certification program, who, have had 125 exhibits going into their trials. Because
Wow.
once I teach them how to do it, now they get the hang of it, and it's like awesome. I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator.
Okay.
So,
Sometimes you have to.
yeah, but that's the only thing that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then A is anticipate what the type of narcissist you're dealing with, and be 2 steps ahead of them. And you can also anticipate that they're going to bait you. They're going to try to trigger you. So I have a whole narc toolbox, a whole bunch of things like, email templates, all sorts of things. And then why is you on the offensive, your mindset, 100% knowing that you're going to win. It's all about your authentic power. At the end of the day, you actually want to be able to be like, this isn't really about the narcissist. This is about you finding your
Mhm.
authentic power, and going beyond life after this person, and really knowing then you find your power.
Right.
And I always say it's like Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch flew around her, and she was like, "Go away, you have no power here." And that's really what it's all about, because afterward, you are so much stronger and so much more powerful, and you really realize who you actually are, and you find your authentic power, and
Mm.
and that's what it's really all about.
When you quit playing their games or quit, every time I expected that he would be reasonable and be able to compromise, I was taking another shot to the heart. When you quit playing that game and quit trying to convince them to sit down at the table and have a reasonable conversation, boy, everything changes.
Yeah, because you know what? I always say they're the worst right before they're ready to give up. And they're like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. It's like they think they just need to scream louder and scream longer and scream, whatever. And
Yeah.
then once they realize, oh, they're not going to give in, that's when they start to panic because their supply source is walking out the door,
Right.
because they
And
always overplay their hand. They always do.
well, and then you can find some of the best behavior from them right before you're filing for divorce or leaving the relationship or whatever,
Totally.
which adds to the confusion and causes a lot of people to hook back in going, well, they changed now.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
of course.
But we
Which
know how that goes. We know how that
Yeah.
plays out. It just means they're going to be right back in about another year or 2
Totally.
years
Or less.
or less,
Yeah.
couple months.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client who said that she went back and, the guy was like really good for a little while. And then just as they were walking out the door one day, they were going to an event and right under her breath, she heard him say, oh, lipstick. Cause and she knew, cause that was like his reference to her, like kind of looking like, in his words, slutty.
Wow. Okay.
And as soon as she heard him mutter that under his breath, her stomach got a pit in it,
Of course.
and she knew that the old version was back.
It's just a matter of time. It's
Yeah,
always just a matter of time till it circles back around again.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing all of this great information. How do people find you if they want to reach out to you and find your book? And how can they learn more about what you do?
Oh, thank you. I have a freebie for everybody in your audience. So they can go to winmynegotiation.com and get my free Crush My Negotiation prep worksheet. It's like a prep playbook.
Okay.
It's really, really cool. A lot of people have used it just to get started. My book, Slay the Bully, is everywhere. Amazon, everywhere. My YouTube channel is RebeccaZung.tv. And my Instagram is at Rebecca Zung.
Okay.
So those are
Okay.
probably the best places to find me.
Okay. Awesome. And we'll put those links in the show notes to this episode so that everybody can find you. So
Oh,
before we close out here, do you have any words of hope for those out there who are stuck in this and trying to figure out which end is up?
I mean, I would just say that you and you alone define your value, and that people will think what you tell them to think. They are so much more afraid of you than you are of them. And they don't attach themselves to you because you have so little value. They attach themselves to you because you have so much. And just remember that. I mean, the reason why they sought you out to begin with is because you had so much value. And
Right.
that's why they don't want to let you go.
Yeah. What a beautiful message and 100% right. So, all right. Well, thank you. And thank you for all the work you do out there for everyone who's living this nightmare.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, very welcome. So, everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining today. I hope that you enjoyed the time, and I have no doubt that you've learned a lot today from Rebecca. And so, thank you for being here. And I wish everyone so much peace on your journey of healing. You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism podcast with your host, Renee Swanson. Be sure to check out our website at www.covertnarcissism.com. There you will find many resources just for you to help you on this journey. You can also reach out to me by email at Renee, RENEE, at cnglifecoaching.com. Those letters are CNG, as in Covert Narcissism Group. I do look forward to hearing from you. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson and the Covert Narcissism podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. It does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and information provided.